Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this beautiful live stream, the 4th of August. We're back again, and we've got a whole car full of J-mods, you could almost say. Even like a station wagon, we would need to fit all 6 of us. Great reference. I don't know why I went for the car analogy, but it's fine. In the top left corner, we've got Mod Jack. Say hi.
Hi.
There we go. Then you've got me in this beautiful middle box, Mod Porky. Then we're going to go to the right. We've got Mod Stu from the Tutorials. Say hi.
Hello.
And then we're going to mix it up a little bit. We'll go to the bottom, and then the middle one. We've got Mod Raven.
Hello.
Beautiful. We'll go to the right, where we've got Mod Kayosi.
Hello. I'm in the seat behind the driver on the right.
Yes, nice. I'm glad you are.
Wait, shotgun.
This is a very strange car.
And we've got Mott Rowley on the left driving the car today.
Hello, driving? What? I thought. Never mind.
No pressure.
I'm alright.
Yeah. Oh, we'll make
Where
these
are
look
we?
easy, right?
My hands
Are
on.
we sat on the handbrake or something? This is a very strange car.
The car is going from left to right. The front of the car is the left, the back of the car is the right. It must be.
Because then we wouldn't have Mott Rowley driving.
Right,
Yeah,
I see.
I'm shotgun, which means I must be next to the driver, which means it's 3 rows.
Anyway.
I feel like someone must be in the trunk by now. Anyways, exactly.
We've already gone on a tangent. Well done.
I mean, this is what you have if you go on holiday in a car, right? There's always an argument between the siblings or brothers on the back. Yeah, there we go. We've got Desperate Measures live. We've still got the cool assets for that as well. Go play it. I mean, the requirements, you can also find them in game now, but it's a cool quest. Raven worked on it as well. So we talked about it last week as well, which is really cool. I think we also got a hand from quite a few of the Lore Council members here today as well. So go and play that. We've also got double XP coming up. This Friday it starts. Really cool. Or at least if you want to get those double gains, it's always quite nice. We have got today. In today's update we announced there's going to be a double XP toggle, so you will be able to turn it off and turn it on with like a countdown of an hour. So you don't always have to do the double XP if you just want to casually chat or whatever. You have the option to turn it off, which is quite nice. And then last but not least, yeah, exactly. If you just want to do bossing or if you want to whatever. You can now be inefficient during double XP weekend, which is a great thought. And then last but not least, we've got the interface scaling beta still up. If you want to try playing RuneScape on a 4K monitor and read the text significantly better, try it out. It's quite nice. You can also try it on your other regular monitors, or whatever. It's pretty cool. One thing worth noting, and I've seen a couple of messages about that, is that if you are on the beta, your progress made on the beta will not carry over to your live account. So remember that. Cool. Without all that done, we've got a lot of people from the Lore Council here today. So I think we should just start answering lore questions, really. I see a lot of people being hyped in the chat. I want to start a bit more general, and then we'll get into the more nitty-gritty lore questions and the ones. We had a ton, so I will also apologize that we'll not be able to answer all the questions. There are also a couple of questions that are literally asking for us to tell what's happening next. We kind of don't want to go into that either, and we hope to tell you all that information with future quests and content. With that out of the way as well, I'll jump into the first question, and I think this one is going to you as well, Mod Jack. We've had a lot of lore content recently with Archaeology, Desperate Measures. What can we expect next? Will we see lore updates in other content besides major content updates and quests?
Yeah, we will. And so some people may have heard I've been trying for a while to get lore into other updates, especially updates outside the content team as well. And it turned out that the guys who were making Yak Track were quite excited to try to get some lore into the game as well. So we've been working with them, and the next Yak Track is actually going to have lore content in it. Now that sounds a bit scary because Yak Track is like stuff can be locked behind Yak Track. So the compromise that we've all agreed together is while the yak track is running, there'll be some tasks that have some actual concrete lore attached to them, and you'll have to unlock those tasks in order to get access to the lore. But once the yak track is complete, everyone will be able to access that lore, whether they participated in the yak track or not. If you didn't complete it, or if you were never even a player during that yak track, you'll still be able to access that lore after it's completed. So I'm pretty excited for that, because that gives us like avenues to continue the story in a timely manner and have more things happen. So that's going to be the next, like, the next lore revelations will be coming with that, I think.
Mm-hmm. I know that players in the past have been slightly concerned about lore going into temporary events, because after the event is over, it's kind of out of the world. Is that something we are taking into consideration?
So it'll remain permanently in game. There'll be an NPC who through whom you can access the lore. It'll be conversations, lore books, that sort of thing, and that NPC will be there, and you'll be able to access him in order to get access to the lore. Whether if you, I think you can only experience it once. If there's a conversation, you can only watch that conversation once. But if you haven't watched the conversation yet, you can just go to that NPC and he'll explain to you what you need to do in order to get access to that content.
There's a few people in the chat that are going, lock lore behind MTX. And I think one of the things that ModJack is trying to explain here is that it isn't locked behind MTX. It's available during the yak track, but this is permanent lore as an addition. I've just seen people repeating the thing.
It essentially won't have any once that yak track is completed, the Q3 yak track. It won't. It has no real tie to the yak track anymore. There's no yak track involvement with the lore once it's in game. So it's a permanent lore addition to the game. I mean, we're not talking about like a Grandmaster Quest or anything like that. No. We're talking about a few conversations, lore books. We're trying to start, start small and see how it works out, see how people respond, and then we'll do more with that if we can and should.
Yeah, like
I think the main thing here is. Sorry, I think the main thing here is that we're able to put more stuff in that we wouldn't have been able to get in otherwise, like if it needed to go into a large major content update. We can sprinkle these in more often then.
We really like the idea of the world sort of moving forward and events continuing to happen and NPCs like just commenting on the world as it's changing and on recent events and that kind of thing. And this is a way for us to do that, which is pretty good.
Yeah. So like the way I interpret this is like it's just going to be the yak track that you're used to. It's going to be the same. Or then on top of that, there's like a kind of like a lore element completely separate from that, and that's kind of interwoven with yak track the moment it releases. But once it's over, it's just kind of becomes available to anyone the whole time as well, right?
Yep.
I think that's
that's absolutely right.
Cool.
Yeah.
I will also, the one thing that I forgot to mention is because we've got quite a few people in the call, there is a high likelihood that we will talk over each other accidentally, as we have slightly more latency than we would have if we were all sitting in the same room. So apologies for that if any of us is going to come across as very rude because they keep talking over people. We are not rude, we are very kind people.
If that happens, just make a high-pitched re-sound until everyone else stops. Then you can just talk.
I mean, I've got high expectations from you now, ModJack. So we'll get there. All right. Another interesting question, which I was slightly broader in the context of lore, which I also think is kind of interesting to ask, is how far ahead do we plan story plots? Have we been building towards the existing storyline for years, or is our writing less locked down in advance and more responsive?
It has been the case in the past that the storyline was quite unplanned and adaptable. For the last few years, we've been much more concretely locking down the story, or at least it's not that the story has a definite. It will only go this way. It's more there is a plan. We are building towards that plan. If the plan needs to change, it can and will change. So it's like a constantly updating expectation of where we're going and how we're going to get there. And that's planned out a good, 5 years in advance. It depends how quickly we can move the story along, right? About 4 years ago, we had a 5-year plan. That plan is probably now a 4-year plan from now, even so. Yeah, it's a continually updating, forward-looking plan that we are working towards. But we have and will continue to make changes to it. For example, when we first wrote that plan, Anachronia as a piece of content didn't exist. It wasn't imagined. That appeared as an initiative for a project that we were going to be making. So we then updated the plan to accommodate Anachronia, factor it into the plot that we had. So, for example, it was our expectation that Kerapak was going to be a major villain in the plot. The existence of an island full of dinosaurs was kind of a wrinkle, and then we explored ways that we could make that work. And actually, it worked out really nicely, and it gave a location and a motivation and a plan to Kerapak that was otherwise kind of. And then Kerapak will do something bad, and it ended up providing the detail for that plan.
Can I see it as like there's an overall direction you as a lore council want to take the story towards, and then depending on kind of partially what the updates are and everything else, we will kind of potentially steer it a little bit left or right, or we make some changes to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
we know when.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, James.
I say it's also not just based on what updates we're planning on releasing as well. We have modified things based on what the players have wanted, what the players have said interest them. Like we look at things like surveys, but we're also we troll Reddit and the Discord and whatnot to see what interests players, and we've modified things based on that. So it's a mixture of things that change. It isn't just we want to do X update. It's also a case of going, we had this plan, but we've seen how this plan isn't what people want, so let's adjust the plan.
In sort of concrete storytelling terms, we know where this storyline is going. We have a planned finale and ending. We have plot points that we're working towards, character arcs that we're working towards, and we know what the next storyline is in some detail, and we know what the storyline after that is in vague detail. If you see what I mean. So like we have a relatively concrete plan for this storyline, exactly where it's going. We know what we're working towards, we know what we're building towards, we know what we're hinting at. And then the next storyline is less detail, and the storyline after that is less detail. So, the further you get out, the more vague it becomes, because it's just a plan at that point.
It's really interesting looking back through some of our old plans as well, and how characters have stuck around, but their motivations have totally changed, or like areas we were looking to explore really, really deeply, and we just haven't touched them because either plans have changed or our interest in where we want to take the story has gone in a wildly different direction.
Yeah, is it because so if I take archaeology as an example, and I'll ask this then to you, Riley, as well, because you did a lot of that. Like you wrote a lot of lore things into like archaeology, and I imagine that 3-4 years ago we probably weren't thinking of archaeology. But for archaeology, there are also a couple of story arcs in archaeology itself, right? These are already kind of vaguely written out now, or is that also still to be decided?
Again, there's a malleability to it. Like when we were writing the designs up for the various dig sites, we pulled, or at least I pulled some of the elements that we've been discussing as a lore council. So not really narrative necessarily, but kind of some of the interesting elements of it, like key features, if you will. Like just interesting things to explore, like different beliefs, political systems, and things like that. But yeah, like I had a design for, say, Orphan almost 2 years ago now, and a lot of the broad beats of that are still true. But obviously, with everything that's happened in the interim, it's having to change fairly significantly in some ways as well.
Okay. I like I just find it fascinating, because it's kind of like maybe it's almost like clay, right? We make something out of the clay, but if we need to make changes, we can form it slightly differently.
I'd like to give a really concrete. I mean, Anachronia is a fairly concrete. I'd like to give a more concrete example, because obviously a lot of that would involve spoilers for the upcoming storyline. I can't give anything really concrete.
Cool.
We'll take an element that we had planned for a purpose. It doesn't work out for its purpose, so we reuse it in a different. We'll keep that plot element, but we'll plug it in a different part of the storyline, twist it about so it makes sense.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to get into a couple more of the nitty-gritty questions, I think. What I basically did, I had tons of questions, put them in a document, and I asked these lore experts to tell me which were interesting questions to ask, or which ones they had some interesting answers, or they just wanted to answer in particular. So I'll go kind of. We've made a rough selection. We'll go through these, and we'll see where we get. First one is, why isn't there an aftermath to Desperate Measures quest? This individual, MP Ruba, says Elder Gods waking up is about as important event as Guthric's death. So is it going to be another age-breaking point? And then I'm going to ask you, Raven.
So only the quest concluded. The storyline continues. So why isn't there an aftermath? Is more a case of going. You've missed the keyword of yet. Like, we obviously have plans. Enough stuff is set up. We are obviously doing more. It ain't over yet. Basically, the storyline will continue.
War is coming, and then we have that beautiful voice fade out thing. I just like that one. I like that as a line. What did you want to say, Jack?
I feel like we should probably mention that this is very likely to contain spoilers for Desperate Measures.
Oh yeah,
Even if we not do, we're almost certainly going to spoil Desperate Measures. So if you haven't played Desperate Measures, go play it.
It's probably worth picking up the last part of that question as well, as to whether it's another age breakpoint. I don't know, maybe Jack, if that's something you want to elaborate on.
Yeah, I'm actually one of the lore books that will be coming with the Yak Track is about this question of where the ages are and who defines them and why they're dated the way they are and that kind of thing, which is never like they've all just sort of existed. Like the fundamental question for me is like, who says it's the fifth age? Who enforces that it's the fifth age? If some shopkeeper wants to keep on using the fourth age calendar, who's sending troops around and the police around to stop them from doing that? Right? Why did cultures adopt this? And so I've been writing a lore document about that. So in that regard, like, no, I would say it's not going to be another age break. It's historically looking back at events that happened that creates the system of ages as written. I wouldn't expect there will be some handsome one-armed historian in 2,000 years who looks back at history and says, yes, the most defining thing that happened in this 1,000-year period was it the discovery of runestones? Was it the death of Gothics? Was it the awakening of the Elder Gods? And they'll sort of define things there, but it's kind of impossible to say while it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks for that answer. I'm kind of excited to read a bit about the Yak Track lore there. I'm kind of intrigued by that bit myself. Aside from that, this is a question, another one from MP Room actually. I've put that one. Does Zuzu or John Sturm hold the horn? He refuses to believe it's lost. Everyone there knew about its power. No way in hell, those their words, they would let it slip away. And after all the damage it has done, Kiyoshi, would you like to comment anything on this?
Yeah, so I've got some bad news if you haven't finished the port storyline, but John Strum won't be interested because he's kind of dead a little bit. But the main thing there, I think, is that I'm not sure that many people in the world of Illinois, or even at all, will even know that the horn was an Elder artifact, or even the fact that Quinn was using it and it wasn't just some innate magic that Quinn had. And the whole deal with that raid was, he's going to kill Quinn because Quinn's causing all these problems around the island. And fundamentally, that's successful because Quinn is also now dead. So I guess it's just kind of sat there waiting for somebody to claim it, or at least find it.
We did have a plot line recently where using Zuzu and the Elder Horn was actually one of the possibilities, and in the end we went with a different plot line, but it was on our sort of short list of. So like we have one of the important things about our setting is having lots and lots of pieces in place. Ports is great for this because it's so incredibly lore dense. Of having all these pieces in place that we can draw on when we need to, but we don't see them as like unanswered questions that absolutely must be concluded quickly. They're more just like options that we have to draw on for our main storyline.
I think that's true. It's worth going to that one a bit more. As one of the things I've noticed from a lot of the questions that we got asked was very much trying to end all the kind of plot points. It was like there must be an answer now, and everything must be neatly sealed away and thrown away into a corner. And so that's not how storytelling works. Like particularly something like an MMO even, which of course goes on effectively forever. You need to have these plot threads that you can pull from and draw from and use. That isn't to say you never end anything. You do end things. But you need to pick and choose when you end something. You can't just end everything immediately. It's got to be brought on. And a lot of stuff we've seeded rather than for long-term future plans as well.
Yeah, if we didn't have all these plot threads to draw on over time and gradually build up, it would feel very much like, oh well, we've run out of story and now we need to come up with something brand new on. Stuff would just appear out of nowhere if we didn't have these threads to draw on.
Yeah.
It's more difficult to finish so many different things all at once as well, and we have a central storyline too. Like, we can still do a few satellite ones, but like literally going over every single one all of the time is just not feasible. And at the moment, our focus is very much like the Elder Gods Keropac storyline, so that's getting most of our attention.
That's kind of the quest we're currently working on, right? Or like this story we work on, so it kind of makes sense to continue that one for a bit.
Someone's made a comment that they felt we misunderstood the question and that it was actually more asking, I guess, about like post-quest content and like world ramifications. So the obvious two are like, why isn't there more sign that the volcano exploded, and why aren't the NPCs in the game talking about the events that happened? I guess are the two main.
I mean, I can give you the real answer to that, which I may as well go with.
It's a bit of a sad answer, though.
Well, I mean, the real answer is the truthful one, which is that development of anything takes time, and time equals resources that you have available to you, and you only have a limited amount. So your options come to be, do I want to do this cosmetic thing to say, ooh, or do I want to create sort of interesting content as part of it? Example that again comes with post-quest dialogue. Like, sure, a lot of people like post-quest dialogue, but the vast majority of people don't actually engage because they do the quest and they move on. So you go, do I do the post-quest dialogue, or do I focus on making the quest dialogue as detailed and as good as possible? And I don't think people quite get the speed at which we work as well, the sort of closeness at which we work. So, like, I think I was working on the dialogue for Desperate Measures about a week and a half before it went live, more or less. So there's that time in it. So you've got to look at where you spend these resources. And ultimately, we didn't have the resources to go. For example, for Desperate Measures, we could have gone, we want the volcano with a bit of lava on the side kind of thing, or do we want Kerapac's lab? And it doesn't sound like the two of them are comparable, but the two of them are comparable in kind of the resources it costs and what you use. So that's why we don't have all these things. You have to make those difficult choices. You go, what realistically is what matters? What's going to make that big impact? And there are always going to be points where you've gone, oh, I could have done more, but you know that with the resources you have, you've got to make those calls. And we see this a lot in content. It comes up a lot in content of you've got to make that choice, and
that's one of those.
No, I just
and that goes for every discipline as well, not just narrative. So I think the prime example there of it was like, we really need to show what full looks like, but creating that huge of a model for like a single tiny little thing, and like, do we have the budget to make a cutscene? So the compromise there was making like a 2D cutscene, which is still, still gets across all of the emotion and the visuals for it, but the cost of that in terms of development time is, and the amount of people and time they need to work on it is vastly reduced.
So narratively, has Full relocated to the volcano?
No.
Or was it a case of just punching through, doing the damage, and we're drawing?
She went up and down, so she's done it and gone back. Oh, there's a question.
Spoilers!
There's a comment here. So
that's what we said. It's definitely going to spoil the quest.
So in continuing this, someone's just asked, said the answer is just take a little bit longer to release the quest. But again, that isn't an option. That isn't something we can do. And we actually did extend the deadline of when we had planned for Desperate Measures in order to account for various things. But we can't work like that because we have so much that we need to try and get done. By extending the time it takes to do one thing, you're adding a lot of time onto all other future projects. And it's not a one-for-one. It tends to roll and spiral, and it become more problematic. So by giving it one extra quest to put maybe a couple of graphics on, and Again, the resource cost isn't like a week or a little bit, it's quite dramatic in order to make it. We would have had to have taken that out of something else. So we'd have had to maybe cut one of the other pieces of content just to extend it, and that would be less time with you guys having content. So it's a difficult choice we make, and we make we try and find the best middle ground of it.
Yeah, if
we could have cut. Sorry, go ahead.
If we delayed everything we worked on until we were happy with it, we'd never release anything.
Yep,
that's also true. Yeah.
It's part of basic professionalism in producing anything is knowing when is the right time to launch it now, because we could sit and polish a piece of content for a year.
Just to clarify, maybe happy is not the right word. Like what we put out, generally we are really happy with. But there are degrees of happiness.
Is it
Indeed,
perfect? Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
and there is always more you could add. There's always more you could add. And it's learning to be comfortable with, well, it has to go out anyway, otherwise we'd never produce anything.
Yeah, no, it's just a balancing act. It's a difficult conversation, and yeah, there are things we could do more. Sometimes maybe we could have done things slightly less as well. But I think we're overall pretty decent hitting that balance as well.
Where is pain?
Someone was just questioning. Sorry, Stu, go ahead.
There's a related question in the chat if you wouldn't mind asking it from Stone490. How did Fall get from Karamja to Anachronia? Are you comfortable with going into the mechanics of how the Elder Gods work?
She swam through the lava.
Simple as that.
She swam down, she swam through the lava, and she swam back up.
These are the people who made planets. They can move through planets pretty easily. It's not really a problem.
Generally, each world has a core of lava inside as well, right? So I guess
I think we were even talking about
world.
having a tunnel through the earth as well, like a worm.
Not necessarily lava. There'll be a layer of lava somewhere. Yeah.
In terms of the I think we all agree that we'd like to see consequences happen. We'd like to see the world move forward. We'd like to see characters in particular. I mean, the environment is important, but it has its own set of production difficulties. But characters in particular, like responding to events that have happened, giving their opinion, giving their emotional reactions, is quite important to making it feel like the world has changed. I think our preference is to do that in future content, like characters respond to things that have happened. Now, sometimes the gaps between content are larger than would be helpful for doing that in a timely fashion, which is partly why we're interested in trying to get lore into other content, because then that means that we can do a little bit more of that. And post-quest dialogue isn't necessarily the right way to do that. If the ideal for me is like content A leads to content B includes in its premise the response to content A, and thus the world continues to move forward, and that's always, I think, what we want to strive for.
Yeah.
Anyone want to add? Great. Then we'll continue with the next question.
15 minutes.
I like the discussion even amongst us. I think it's absolutely great. But for me, it makes it kind of difficult. It's like, are we going to move on to the next question? Yes, we are. Right? So, this one is one for you, Motstu. Are there entities that fulfill the same role as the Amaskut or the Ithlarin in other worlds / planes, or are there roles exclusive to Gielinor? It is stated in it is stated that the death of each world is the first mortal to die in it. So I'm wondering if there's a similar mechanic to decide who these entities are.
So my view on this is that the afterlife can vary wildly from world to world, factoring the nature of its inhabitants and therefore its death and its runic essence. A world where the death doesn't necessarily have someone who guards souls into the afterlife, and they don't necessarily have an antagonist like Mascot. Riley, I think you had something else along these lines you were going to talk about?
I think death is an obvious natural process. So it makes sense where there's life that occurs, but it makes you question whether or not, say, a Mascot and Ixalarin are something more akin to middle management. They're not really essential. If they're just fulfilling that role, and who gave them that authority, I think that's something interesting we could look into in future desert content.
Okay. Anyone want to add anything?
Apologies to the middle managers out there.
So I've got a question here from Delusional Freak, which goes back a little bit to, I think, Karamja as well, and Xautak, just skimming over the words. Yes, that one of you just clicked in as well. I don't know who it was out of the 6 or 5 of you, but that one. Delusional Freak asks, are there any plans to expand the Queen of Ashes or the Karamja Gods lore in future quests? Those are the only gods that didn't partake in recent events in the 6th Age yet. Xautak and the other gods are moving around. The Desert Pantheon is making a plan to revert the damage the Yamaskut have caused. Even Brassica Prime and Marimbo have made a move. Who would like to reply?
So, plans, yes, certainly discussions going on, but they're not necessarily going to be the focus of anything, or we're not necessarily going to show them soon. Like it's again that kind of thing of like we've discussed, like we've got those sort of beats and things going forward. We also have those beats for a lot of different characters and a lot of different things that aren't maybe, part of what we'd consider the main core storyline. It's kind of like, and it's the awful example, when you think about like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you've got the Avengers timeline, then you've got all the other offshoots. So it is a bit like that. We do plan out what people are doing, but the plans are much looser. And not necessarily going to be a thing we show anytime soon. But we are aware of them. We do have thoughts, just they'll have their place when they have their place.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm going to, scrolling through a couple of the questions, so I come across this beauty, which I think is we're going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to take it slightly into a bigger picture again. What do all of you think about the many lore theories that get posted on Reddit and in the RuneScape forums as well, or Twitter? Do all of you have a favorite? Did any of the ideas presented on those theories sound better than what has been planned? And did we even secretly maybe steal 1 or 2 ideas from those?
That's a good question.
So I've got one. So obviously we read them. I think all of us stalk Reddit, Discord, and everything, looking through all the lore theories and going, "Oh, that's what they think." And there are certainly some very interesting theories that we can get very interested in. But so I do have actually one where we did steal the lore from the players. I say steal; their idea was better, which is Ripper Demons. When we were originally coming up with Ripper Demons, we had just a very sort of simplistic idea. It was going to be just a big demon with claws. We didn't put a huge amount of thought into it. It was relatively mundane. And then we saw someone was posting in, I think it was the forums at the time, and they were talking about how, wouldn't it be creepy, because they'd seen the concept art, if it wasn't the demon, but the demon was actually the bandages taking over a host. And I was just like, yes. This is much more twisted than what we had. This is a much more twisted idea. So, we stole that. Because it was, So we do take some of the player theories in. One thing I will say is that a lot of the theories that players make, sometimes, obviously they don't have the full information. And it tends to be coming with theories in a very kind of closed bubble. So look at it through a very sort of focused, laser beam approach, which makes the theories interesting to read, but they don't necessarily work in the big picture. It's also worth, making sure that when you have these theories, you make them open for discussion. We've seen a few things, particularly recently, that people have been deliberately shutting down anyone doing counter theories, and that's not interesting. Because it's much better to see those multiple different discussions going on multiple theories. Because some people can get weirdly close to things that they do not have the information for, and then some people go really off tangent. And I love reading both.
There tends to be a lot of headcanon in player theories, which is fine. I mean, it's great. That's a perfectly good way to theorize. But I interact with the lore community a lot on Reddit. I know not on Reddit, on Discord. I know you guys do as well. And they tends to be a mixture of things that are factually true, things that are not factually true, but people think are factually true, perhaps because they're inaccurately documented on the wiki, and things which you've made up because you prefer them. It's like someone's pet theory or headcanon, or literally like they're aware that it's not true, but they keep saying it anyway because they wish it was true. And then all that gets sort of mismatched together with no differentiation. And then only one theory pops out of that. which is the only possible theory according to them, except that several of the underlying assumptions are actually wrong, or they're not necessarily wrong. They could be wrong, or they could just be not right. Like there are several different possibilities, and that's not the only one.
It's particularly frustrating for me to see headcanons for either the way things players think should play out, or the way they think the character is, even though they maybe either haven't developed far enough yet or haven't revealed a side to themselves. And it doesn't go the way they expected, and they get frustrated, and then are sometimes really mad. And it's kind of frustrating to see that people aren't flexible enough to see things change from their expectations. And, like, quite often things will pan out as you expect, because sometimes tropes are really, really useful, and sometimes we like to subvert expectations.
I find that...
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, I'll try and be quick. I find that if you write something where all of the points lead only to one specific answer, you effectively write yourself into a corner. I find it's better that we have lots of hanging threads that have lots of possibility, and when you start a new update, you start a new project, you can pull the ones that you want to for that particular update and expand on them. I think one good example of where we failed in the past, narratively at least, is with Floor 61. Like, it was very definitely leading to this thing, and then it just becomes unfeasible for whatever reasons, and then it kind of just dissipates a little bit. To say there's only one answer to any solution, I think, is not to be nasty about it, but I think it's lacking in creativity. You need to be able to have these plot threads and come up with multiple different things that you could do with them that are satisfying, and I'd like to think we are starting to achieve that. If we haven't been doing it in recent years, I don't know. I'd like to think we have been doing it in recent years too, but that's...
I think of it as like lore should inspire future creators rather than limiting future creators. Like, you should tell a satisfying and exciting story, which leaves the players and the developers like, oh, I want to see what happens next, and then the developers are inspired to continue that story, rather than, well, I've dictated how it's going to end, and therefore someone eventually has to pick up the chore of doing that.
But also not just throwing stuff to see what sticks, but having a plan when you go in as well does help too. Like, to have a good idea of like we do, like we look ahead for multiple years.
I mean, that's a key word, a key thing there, which you just said, Jack, which is when you said the person picks up the chore. And that is actually quite a big thing, because, of course, part of what makes, RuneScape interesting is you can see that people put the effort into the quest. They put their sort of heart and soul into these storylines. So people need to feel like they've got that kind of ability to, put their little personal touch in it to make it something special. Otherwise, it becomes a chore. And when something's a chore, particularly a story, like we've all played games or we've seen TV shows where the writers are clearly fed up of doing it, and it really, really shows. And we don't want to be like that, so it's important to make sure that we don't force that to happen.
Yeah, totally. At the same time, there does need to be some consistency and coherency. So it's a really delicate balance of like all working towards a common goal, but having areas that we feel we can have some sense of ownership and responsibility over, rather than just being told what we have to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why we have this council, which is to make sure that when people come up with ideas, we can go, that's a lovely idea, but have you considered, to try and make sure that it's molded in the kind of the right direction, while still allowing people to have that kind of their little touch in it. Because there's been a few times where we've had people come to us with lore or story ideas that have been wildly outside of canon. And we've been able to kind of go, that's really cool. What are you trying to get from this? So let's just squeeze this so it does fit within. Is kind of what we're here for.
Stu, you're the only one who hasn't commented on this. Would you also like to add anything about rating, player lore, and all those kinds of bits and bobs?
It's largely been covered already, I think.
Right.
There are some very, very fascinating ideas there. Sometimes we are inspired by those. Sometimes they're a reassurance that we're heading in the right direction or in the wrong direction. So yeah, we keep an eye on it and we factor into it, but we generally have a particular plan in mind that we're working towards, and it helps to see it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
There is a guy who has been posting the same question over and over again, so I'll answer it because it's quite quick. He keeps saying, what are your thoughts on creating content that directly features the Abyss? And my feeling would be, the Abyss isn't really a storyline. It's a world setting element. The Abyss exists. It's a place. There are creatures there, demons and other things. If we were to tell a story about those creatures, the Abyss would inherently feature. If we were to tell a story which, required a lot of abyssal mechanics in order to make sense, we would. But I don't think the Abyss itself is a storyline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do the Shattered World storyline since we introduced Shattered Worlds, because we kind of set up a premise, but the thing there is really it's about the characters rather than the setting itself. Like, you could set that potentially anywhere, but it's as you said, like the Abyss itself doesn't matter. And the same with one of the boss fights that we kind of designed in our own time quite a number of years back now, and it's not made any progress, and it would be really cool, but again, the setting of it isn't what's important, it's the character that's involved.
Yeah. I think they know about that, don't they? I think some information about that went out in one of the events.
Possibly.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. That it's in the Abyss is actually coincidental. It doesn't matter that it's in the Abyss. It is in the Abyss, but it would be fine if it wasn't.
Cool. Thanks for these answers. I've got a Desperate Measures themed question again, so expect some kind of lore spoilery stuff potentially. In Desperate Measures, we find out that out about Shadow Anima. What is that? I don't know. Which is apparently poisonous to the Elder Gods. Could we use it to kill them if necessary? Handling it shouldn't be too difficult since Karapak was able to do it. This is a question from Rux.
I was thinking about the answer to this question. David, do you want to jump on this, or shall I randomly?
I mean, I had a pretty sarcastic response, which I'm happy to go with, which is you could, if you wanted to, kill all life on Gielinor, as Karapak would. And also, if you had access to a singularly unique device created by the most intelligent scientist on the planet, then, it would be super duper easy. Yeah, definitely easy.
What I was going to say was Karapak's plan wasn't to kill the Elder Gods. Karapak's plan was to kill the Elder Gods' eggs. And he was killing their eggs by poisoning their food supply. So he wasn't blasting an antimatter ray at the Elder Gods and killing it with them. He was poisoning food, which was being fed to eggs. So it's like, that's not a weapon exactly. And also, the conclusion of the quest is Full literally just headbutts this thing. So he had this device running for quite a long time, and it wasn't sufficiently dangerous that Full couldn't headbutt it. So you would need a much larger source of this stuff I would say there's no evidence in the quest that it's an effective weapon against Elder Gods, living Elder Gods.
Like, if you look at what's described in the quest, they largely consider it an annoyance. Even with all Karapak's big plan of doing this other, they were only not stopping it because they were like, we can stop it. I mean, spoiler. They're going, we can stop it, but we will obliterate most of your coastal cities and stuff in doing so. And we figured you probably didn't want that. So yeah, not necessarily the best plan to stop.
So I might be going off track. Please tell me if this is a question you guys don't want to answer. We're talking about Shadow Anima, and there's this question from Taldrat which says, and this could even be factually incorrect. I don't know. I'm just asking the question. How did Guthix know about Shadow Anima, and how did he use it?
I've got a cryptic answer for this.
I'll go for it.
I've got a cryptic answer. The answer to this question is in Desperate Times.
Ooh.
It's not explicitly stated, but the answer to that question is in Desperate Times.
All right.
I
like that. Do you want to say something, Jack?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, no, I just, I guess people are going to have to try that quest out again, or have to start examining it a bit more.
Someone's asking, did I mean to say Desperate Measures? No, I didn't. I meant Desperate Times.
All right.
The first one.
Ooh. Sorry for going on the beaten track, putting you all under a bit of pressure. Where was I in the question-wise-ish? Yes. The real elf of Seren asked, Jess is like a clock, Fool is like a worm, Matt is like a humanoid. Could we reveal the form of Wan and Bick?
We can't, but the framing of that is exact. So we've gone through a concept art process with all the Elder Gods now, and the framing of that question is exactly how we presented it. If in the same sense, it was if Jas is a clock and Full is a volcano, then Wen is blank and Bick is blank. And we answered those questions, and we do have pictures of them, but we're not going to show them to you.
Oh, follow.
It's
This
actually,
might be.
sorry, interject quickly. It's actually a build on what KOC was saying earlier about and Raven about not showing the aftermath of the volcano, even though we don't get that necessarily in game. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that has got us on the road to doing things like that, like this concept art that Jack just mentioned.
Just a side question, because I learned about this fact a while ago. Is this have we given a non-canonical reason for why the Elder Gods are called the way they are? For example, why Jess is called Jess. Is that something the players know?
Sorry, go ahead.
The non-canonical version.
So isn't it the sort of internal joke about it, which I'm not even sure whether that's true, but I think it is, was it was supposed to be based on
Java
application server.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
I saw a brilliant post.
That is, but...
It's a brilliant but totally inaccurate post on Reddit, which says that the destruction of the Stone of Jas coincides with our removal of the Java client. And there was this whole theory. It was amazing. Like I was like, oh, that's amazing. It never even occurred to me. It's not correct that we lied to us on purpose, but
that's become historical truth.
They had this theory about where it was going to go next based on that, because it was based on NXT. It was like because NXT has XT in it, like Zautak. They had this whole theory that NXT, Zautak is the manifestation of NXT in the same way that Jas is
Neo Zautak,
which is fantastic. And they were like, obviously, this is why they named NXT that. And I'm like, the people that named NXT don't know what Zautak is. They've never heard of Zautak.
So there is no correlation between that, aside from potentially with Jess being Java application server. I genuinely thought this was a thing we did as Jack, and this is how we got these very cool names for our Elder Gods.
There's a broader fantasy question there about the fact that entities that probably don't need names in any coherent language just have names, because otherwise it's annoying to refer to them. Jas probably doesn't need a name. If you do, like, they're very alien, they're very uninteractive, they're not particularly conversational. They probably don't need names, but they have names because otherwise it's just annoying. So our setting just gives entities like that names.
There's kind of a misplaced shortcut as well. Like, the more powerful an entity is, the less of a name it needs. So, like, you would see, like, a king or something might be like King Narno, Shireen the Third, whatever, and then you've got Zaros. Like, there's some like mythic truth to that.
Yeah, Zaros is more badass because his name is short. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Sorry for that small sidestep. I find it quite interesting, and I even liked how, even though it was a non-canonical question, you were still able to kind of talk about lore and about names in general about Elder Gods again. So thank you for that.
We talk about this rubbish every other week.
Well, that's true, but even then, like, it's cool. I enjoy learning more about the lore this way and about the world myself as well. So that's really cool. There is a question from another one from the real Elf of Seren. You posted about 30 questions, I think. We are in, and this one goes to you, more Rowley, I think. Why was Zerosian imagery allowed to remain on the Slayer Tower? Was it just that Zamorak got banished and the vampires didn't care?
I'll make this a quick one. So I don't think we've necessarily established it. I'd like to think that Vigora pretty much just finished it, like took ownership, whatever, and was probably about to get to it, and then it started sinking into the swamp. So it's like priorities. Could change the cosmetics or fix the underlying issues. It's kind of analogous for our work. And also vampires wouldn't care. It's not the thing involved.
Okay. Another Desperate Timesy one. Why did the Dragon King experiment with the Blackstone Dragon at Ulven? Ulven Kriov, apologies for butchering a name. GIF, what happened to Anachronia?
So, I think I remember reading this one earlier. So, my response here is desperation and faith. Really, the two makes an unpleasant combination. After all, it was, Cranon pushing from it, who was a priest, and they were desperate and driven by,
You could say they were desperate creatures, right?
But
I've just seen an amazing question in the chat, which is how did Zarador squeeze his way into the second floor of the Purple Castle?
Oh God!
Right. I was thinking about this because everyone's always commenting on it, and every quest playthrough, everyone's always like, "How did that guy fit in there?" I would love if we had the time to waste, which we absolutely do not, on modelling Zarador. So that he's kind of like, because he's about 3 times the size of the ceiling. If he had to bend his way in,
that's not the problem.
that'd be amazing.
That's not the problem. It's how many times do the bones on his outfit get caught up against the walls and the stairs and stuff?
You'd have to take that off as well and just be like, why not just send a goblin? I mean, that would be like, no, Zarador would never send a goblin.
Delegate.
So there's an extension to this question that I've seen a few people do as well, which is why is an X person represented? And it's actually because you need to have some room in the room to move.
We got quite a lot in there.
It has to be Corona-proof, right?
And so many of them, it's not even that, but so many of them just, they clip through things already, and it was already difficult to get them there.
All right. I'll just answer this question. There were a lot of questions in chat as well about if there are any plans for specific quests in no particular order. Desert Treasure 2, Dragon Slayer 2, Erexa Quest, Solo Quest, Viraga Quest, Rite of Passage, you name the finale of the Gnomes, all those quests. Do we have plans for those? Of course we have plans, but it doesn't mean they are scheduled or due to release anytime soon. So I hope that clears that up a bit. We always have plans, like we talked about earlier. They've already written all kinds of cool story arcs and kind of plans how they would like them to end. That doesn't mean we're working on
them. Has a pet sequel that we really, really, really want to get into game.
I mean,
that doesn't necessarily mean it's the priority of the company.
Yeah, I'm almost mentally prepared to start considering doing another conclusion to something. They're difficult to do, and they take a lot out of you.
I saw a question. It's like, when is this magical water bottle gonna feature in game? I was like, can we not request for a random water bottle? Then I would like that. Instead of a bottle quest, we'll go for a water bottle quest. I like it.
It's a magic water bottle.
Nice.
Exactly.
Don't encourage him, guys. Don't encourage him.
We can't.
I mean, I'm trying to make them go for it, of course.
There's a lot of questions which are like, is this particular piece of content coming soon? When is this update coming out? We just can't talk about that. We would love to. We're really, really excited. There's so much lore we want to get into the game, but we can't talk about it otherwise.
Never was even telling, is this a new Elder artifact confirmed? If it was up to me, yes, water bottles are a new Elder artifact. Sadly, I'm not on the lore council, so don't take it as canon.
Someone slightly confusingly asked, can we have some quests geared to lower level players and not just high level players? Which is a bit odd, because it's very rare that we release I would say something like 30 to 50% of the quests we release are novice quests. I think we'd prefer to not have so many novice quests, but we tend to keep reintroducing quest concepts. Like the current storyline has 4 quests in it, technically. It's got You Are It, Needle Skips, Desperate Times and Desperate Measures. And Desperate Measures is only really a mid-level quest. It's not a high-level quest. And Needle Skips and You Are It don't have any requirements, I don't think. And Desperate Times has only very modest requirements. So we very rarely release anything I would consider a high-level quest, which would be something like 90s or high 80s in skill requirements, something like that.
Desperate Times.
We went through a period like in 2015, 2016.
You guys do.
We went through a period like in 2015, 2016 where we did nothing but Grandmaster quests, and nowadays we've moved more towards trying to make quests a lot more accessible. So consequently, they have low requirements and therefore tend to be on the lower end of difficulty.
You got the counter question as well now, Mulcher. Can we have more high level quests?
I think we all kind of feel like a quest line should escalate as it goes along, right? We have a rough pattern where there is a storyline, and this storyline sort of formally begins with Desperate Times. We tied a couple of previous quests into it. That it should start out low to moderate, and the quest requirements should gradually rise, and always include the previous quest in that storyline. And then when that storyline concludes at some point in the future, we would probably then start again, quote, at low level and build back up again. So I would expect the quest requirements to gradually rise.
There's also the point, I guess, of quests not necessarily being a conduit for making like difficult gameplay. Like pushing a narrative is not pushing trying to create a narrative and give you some story is the main focus there, and any gameplay is kind of secondary to that. Not that it's not important, but it's not the real focus, I suppose. So difficulty is it's difficult to detach that in that kind of way.
Yeah. Someone was just asking about 80s and 90s being a medium level quest. No, I meant 80s and 90s would be a high level quest, but we haven't made a quest that requires 80s and 90s for a while. I don't think. Like, I got that wrong? I don't think we have.
No, we haven't.
It's been a while. We made the Arc mini quests, mini quests, because they had requirements in the 90s. We don't tend to go above 80, even for Grandmasters.
Mm-hmm. All right, I see it's almost 6 p.m. or 5 game time, so I want to slowly start wrapping it up. There was one more question that it's probably somewhat of a niche question as well, but I kind of liked it. Because we haven't really spoken much about the Lord of Vampirium or vampires in general. Paul Maffey fell through the portal. Is he dead, or is there a chance we and Feliev can go on one last rescue trip to Vampirium in a somewhat distant future to rescue him?
Okay, so strictly he's just MIA. That's as much as I'll answer definitively. He's kind of like one of those loose threads, and definitely I can see a concept of players going to find out. You'd have to think, if he did survive though, what happened to him, right? Is he gone a bit Rambo? Gone to survive? What would he have had to do? That sort of thing. But yeah, there are definitely concepts we've had floating around for Vampirium as a whole. Not necessarily Paul Maffey, but
he'll be the final boss of the next storyline, I expect.
Yeah.
Could be.
Could be anything else.
All right. Yeah, great. I can continue again. It's so difficult to figure out whether I can continue to talk again. I love this. We've got 2 minutes till 6. So I know there are tons of questions and tons of questions we didn't even answer. The majority, I think all 5 of you, are in the lore channels on the Discord, in discord.gg/rs. And they are up for a good conversation. Always challenge them as well, make their life a bit difficult. But they love to talk about lore. And they are there if you just want to chat with fellow lore enthusiasts as well.
There's a specific channel called lore-players-ask-jmods, and there is there's a role called @jagexlore, and so if you just go in there and post your question, we may answer it, we may not.
Exactly.
We certainly get emails from that thing several times a day.
I see. I filtered mine away from that.
Oh yeah, you got to turn off that. Yeah.
So that's a good place if you've got lore questions to ask. And I want to end on the final question, which is: what are the problems we face with writing lore for a game that's about 20 years old and has 20 years of history and content?
So one of the initial things is a lot of the early stuff isn't written down. Like, there's a lot of the early lore that when the original writers wrote it, it was entirely in their head, and then they'd never shared it in any way, shape, or form. So there's trying to find and piece together what they had planned to try and make it work into a cohesive whole. That's my initial problem. And also, as we discussed,
sometimes there was no plan.
that was true.
Just
Yeah.
setting up a future plot thread with no real plan at the time as to where it might go, and then that
Yeah.
thread just
Well, but
remains
the
there
strong-
indefinitely.
And so many of them going, and it will be this city that you will get. And we obviously can't keep doing cities because, one, they're incredibly difficult to design around to make them interesting. Two, they require an enormous graphics budget, like an enormous graphics budget. And three, the reward for everything can't be a city. But once you've promised it, that's kind of, it's out there and it becomes a problem. I'm looking at you, Arthur Sandra, Sunken City, Elf City, till we find a
Menopause,
manager.
yeah, all of them.
Menopause.
The worst thing for me is just having to know literally everything when you have got a 20-year-old game with 20 years worth of content. At one point, was something new literally every week, and you can have the
that's the
best
problem
memory in your
with
world and still not remember everything.
We all just go with, we just don't know anything.
I'd say for me, it's like the having like 10 different narratives that have corruption as their kind of main theme, and they're completely disconnected, and having to find a way to make sense of it all. And like you can maybe see how we start to do that, but I wouldn't say that's a problem. That's kind of the joy of the job. That's the fun part.
All right.
There's an interesting problem to do. We sort of talked about it earlier about changing authors over time. That we're not the original authors of RuneScape, right? And we have to find an inspiration that works for us, and we have to find stories that we want to tell. Our job is not and cannot be to try to work out what Paul wanted to say and say that. It has to be to tell the story that makes sense to us and that means something to us, because otherwise we're not going to be able to produce a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's relevance to the updates we're doing at the moment. We're tying together a narrative thread that maintains the updates for that year and needs to be what's appropriate for that content too. The lore is there to service the updates rather than the other way around.
All right.
Yep.
I'm going to thank all 5 of you for your time. Mod Jack, Mod Stu, Mod Riley, Mod Raven, and Mod Koyosi. You can also find them on Twitter. Just add Jagex in front of their mod name and you will find them. Fingers crossed. I think that's the case. Then on Thursday, I will see Mod Jack and Mod Stu again. So it's just going to be the top 3 of us. I think we're going to cut the car in half.
Top 3, that's definitely the right way to put it.
Well, we're going to the top 3 of us in the screen. We're going to cut the car in half, and we're just going to continue with the top half of the car. I don't know why, but I like this. This is good.
So this is perfect. Going down the top part of the car, we're a double-decker car.
You mean the right-hand side of the car?
With no wheels.
I've never seen a double-decker car before.
We established that it's like clay, and you need to mold it into the shape you want it at times, right? So, like, yes, like this car is ever-changing.
I should drop something on Rowley. Can I do that? You've got a Pokemon Red cartridge, so you can make this gag work.
Oh.
How can you not have a Pokemon Red cartridge on your desk? What?
Oh. All right. Yeah. So the 3 of us will be back on Thursday. We'll be starting an hour early at 4 p.m. BST, 3 p.m. game time. We're doing it right. Yes, I am doing it right. So make sure to join us for these tutorials, and we're going to look at the Troll War Zone. I've seen some good slides for that, so that's going to be really cool. Stay tuned for that. I see the chat as well. Have a lovely giggle there, Mod Jack. Double XP starting on Friday, so get your preparation in for that. There you go. We've got the banner, and with that said,
pausable timers as well. Even more reason to play.
Yeah.
The pausable timer, even more reason to play.
Pause the timer. You can pause or toggle portables, improvements, and we've also got the combat dummy stuff. So should be a good double XP weekend. And with that all said, look after yourselves. Tot ziens.